believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Brendas, also known as Ricky Branson. A great episode for you today. Today we have returning guest and someone who's a regular on this show and my other roundtable discussion show I host with, or I should say co-host with, Sam Tripoli from the Tinfoil Hat Podcast, Charlie Robinson from Macroaggressions, and Midnight Mike from the OBDM show. That show is called The Union of the Unwanted, and her name is Courtenay Turner. She's a researcher, podcaster, thinker, philosopher, historian, and today we talk about the past, the present, the future. And it was truly a pleasure to get her take and perspective on so many of the issues that we talked about and topics that we hit on today. It's a fun discussion. And of course, before we get into this fun discussion, I have to remind you, this is a value for value show. Please, if you get any value, even just a little bit of value out of these discussions, please consider giving some value back. It doesn't have to be financial. I know many people are in tough financial times. If that's the case, feel free to rate the show, review the show, leave a comment on any of the platforms you watch or listen to the Ripple Effect Podcast. The show's also open source, so feel free to post it anywhere. And that does help fight against the algorithms that censor podcasts and shows like these. But if you are in a good or stable financial situation and you would like to support the show, please consider signing up for a Patreon page. You can support us as little as $1 a month. And if a small percentage of people who listen to watch the Ripple Effect Podcast donated as little as $1 a month, I could easily do the show full time. So no donation is too little to give. Also consider sending a one-time donation via PayPal or Venmo. All these links will be in the show description. We also have a crypto wallet. And if you want to get some cool merch, check out the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com or find all these links on my website, therippleeffectpodcast.com. And check out our merch store. We have tons of cool logos, designs, t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, kids' clothes, and much more. And the quality is second to none. You get the stuff quickly, and you also support a small family business. The merch store is now run by my dear friend Ryan Graham, who is one of the owners of Big Frog Merch and also one of the creators and hosts of the Independent Review podcast. So he's a podcast listener, he's a fan, and he also helps supply us with some amazing gear. So please check out the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com. You can support Ryan and you can support the Ripple Effect Podcast all at once. So a great way of getting some cool stuff and supporting shows you enjoy. I think that's it. Enjoy this amazing conversation with Courtenay Turner. Check out all her links in the show description, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.
I'm cautiously optimistic. That's kind of how I see it. And as I had said on Monday, I think that the pushback that I constantly get is, oh, you just like worship Trump. You're just like a rah-rah MAGA cheerleader. Like, that really couldn't be further from the truth. But I actually, ironically, like I've been really voicing a lot of my concerns, particularly with this technocracy stuff. But I've studied the history of this technocracy, and we have blueprints for well over a century. And honestly, I think, obviously the technology didn't exist then and we didn't have the language for it. But if you look back even millennia, they were talking about this kind of like scientific dictatorship. And so if you think that one man was going to change that whole trajectory, then I think you have a lot more worship in him than I do, actually. That's not to say that I don't think that people should be voicing their concerns and, speaking up against the things that they don't want to see being moved forward. And I've been very much doing that. There are some things Trump is doing that I am really encouraged by, that I really do like, and I hope we see more of, that it's not just, lip service. It's not just an executive order that we keep moving in those directions. And then there's some other things I'm very, very upset about and very concerned about. So, I think you have to take the good with the bad. I think it's not all black and white, and it's not all good or all bad. But I think compared to any other options we would have had, or even any other presidents in recent time, there's nobody who would have done some of the things that he's doing now. So,
Yeah, that's kind of been my point, is that I feel like all of a sudden we have standards that are much higher than we've ever had for any past president. And it's like if any past president did one of the many things he's done recently, we'd be excited, like, wow, this is different. Like we've never would have thought of having a president that would work with somebody like a Robert Kennedy Jr. or give people who lost their jobs because of the vaccine mandates, give them their jobs back and back pay if you're in the military. De-
yeah,
Declass all the JFK and MLK assassination paperwork, which obviously, like, the CIA is very good at hiding stuff, and so who knows, like, what's even there? Maybe we're going to be disappointed, but at least he's making an effort to do
right.
that. So it's like if anybody else did this, we'd be excited, and it's like,
He's talking about getting rid of the income tax.
which
I
is
mean, this is huge. There's a lot of evidence to indicate that the 16th Amendment was never even legally ratified, that they just kind of pushed it through. That's kind of what I tend to believe. I mean, we don't have hard evidence of that, but we do have a lot of evidence that indicates that. And that is kind of my belief. And it was prior to that, it was not constitutional at all. And prior to 1913, we had exactly what he's trying to implement now with the External Revenue Service, which was the tariff system. And then, of course, they changed it under the guise of quote unquote free trade, which was really not about laissez faire economics at all. It was about economic dissolution of our borders and having this exportation of all of our manufacturing. At the time, it was more centered around like the British East Indian Company. But now we see that with China, right? We've exported everything. I mean, it's not just China, but so a lot of things that we could be producing here in this country, we have, exported overseas. And so to change that and when they did it back then, that's where we lost a lot of that income. And so, then they needed to replace it with the income tax. And of course, that was a huge part of paying and funneling money into what they called the Great War at the time. And they had something called the Creel Commission. This was appointed by the British War. It was a subset of the British War Propaganda Bureau. And Edward Bernays and Walter Lippmann helmed this to create all this propaganda to justify having the Federal Reserve, the Income Tax Act, to convince us it was a great thing to have taxes versus tariffs. And there was a tariff act at that time too. It was all in 1913. And so all that to say that this is kind of like going pre-progressive era. And I don't know, that's a pretty exciting thing, I think.
yeah, it's almost like we all want change until there is drastic change. Then people start panicking and they're like, "Oh, wait, this is too much change." It's like more of the same isn't what we want either. And yeah, the tariffs thing, it's funny how many people push back against that. And I guess I'm not a expert, so I can see how people who their whole work is analyzing the economy and whatnot. They can, I've seen different perspectives. What's your opinion? Do you think that it is going to have some negative impacts on the average person? Like, are the costs of things going to go up? How do you think it's going to be handled? Do you think in the long run it will be beneficial?
I think in the long run, it'll be beneficial. I think in the short term, there might be some growing pains, if you will, because there is going to be that transition period where a lot of companies who are dependent on overseas manufacturing that they could get for basically slave wage, right? It was the equivalent of like indentured servitude, very, very low pay. A lot of times it is these kind of like assembly factories. And a lot of times it is actually children working. I don't think it's very humane practices. But all that being said, it is much cheaper. And that's why a lot of people do it, because they just can't afford to hire in-house. But I think that with the tariffs, that's going to shift. And so it will bring more home-based manufacturing and production. And so in the short term, I think it will be more expensive because people will still warrant the higher pay. but I think it'll end up evening out. And yeah, and I think more companies are going to be like they'll have a better marketing results by doing that, because people are trying to bring internal revenue up, and so there a lot of people want to support American made products. I've seen that shift for a very long time. So I think companies who advertise that way, that are truly American made and not just American produced, I think that they'll see I think they'll see preference over their competitors just for that alone. So in the short term, long story not so short, my thought is that in the short term, I think it will be a transition period, but I think in the long term it'll benefit greatly. So
Yeah, I think he is handling the U.S. as a business that's going under, and he needs to like just do
yeah,
drastic.
that's true.
He's pulling out of the WHO. He's talking about getting rid of FEMA. He's talking about all
Yeah.
these type of things, and it's like I don't know how people don't see all these things as like a good thing. Like these are all things that we've been talking about in the
Mm,
alternative media community forever. Like, hey, we should pull out of that
yeah.
show. All the bad things with FEMA, and so all these things, and then because it's Trump, and I think it's almost like a lover who's been cheated on so many times. You're just like, I don't believe
Mm,
being faithful. They've all lied to me before, and so I think we have a hard time believing that any politician won't eventually just stab us in the back or sell us BS. Do you believe? Because I do believe that, like, if you look at like just the journey that he's been on from obviously winning the presidency the first time and kind of being an underdog, nobody really wanting him to run or win, neither party. And then he kind of got to the point where it was so obvious he was going to win that even the Republicans who hated him, didn't want him to win, jump on board just because he was, they jumped on the train because it couldn't be stopped. And then
right.
obviously the COVID thing, and then being
Mm,
banned on every social media platform. I mean, the first president ever to be banned and he was just scraped from the internet like they did to Alex Jones, and they all did it together. They colluded together. They completely gave him no opportunity to defend himself. They tried to pin January 6th on him, even though nobody wants to talk about how many agents and FBI agents and whatnot were there, and then the lack of security and whatnot. But
or how it was like walking into the VIP room of a club. They basically like opened the velvet ropes and ushered people in. I mean,
oh, and then the
yeah.
people who I forget what his name is now, but the guy who was instigating things and that they think was linked to the FBI, who didn't get charged with anything, but he was on tape telling everybody to go in and trying to provoke things. So you have that, you have the trying to lock him up for so many ridiculous things.
Mhm.
He beats Biden in a debate and kind of exposes the world to what basically couldn't be denied anymore, that he wasn't cognitively able to continue. And then soon after, there's an assassination attempt on Trump. So it's like, if we can't beat him, and let's attempt to kill him. And then that didn't work. And then all of a sudden Biden gets COVID and he can't talk to the public right after the assassination attempt. And then soon after that, he drops. So it's like there's all these, pieces of evidence that shows that like the shadow government, the deep state, whoever is behind the scenes pulling the strings, the elite, they obviously don't want him in power. And, they pinned COVID on him. They did, people forget that during COVID, even though I know people are going to bring up, oh, he was a part of Operation Warp Speed. Yes, but he never talked about mandating vaccines, and that's okay. Like, if there's a shitty product on the market, you have the right to buy that shitty product or use that shitty product. Like, my problem was when you're mandating kids, healthy kids who are at no risk, to go back to school having to get this experimental mRNA technology, or people to go back to work just to pay their bills. They have to get it. The military, having to get it. People losing their jobs. So it's like people forget that during that time, Trump was actually getting backlash from the media for the opposite perspective. He wanted to open things up sooner. And they kept saying he doesn't care about human life and all this stuff. And Dale Bigtree from the High Wire, he did a good reflection on that era, because he was kind of noticing the same thing, that people were complaining about Trump and Operation Warp Speed and him bragging about the vaccine. but they forgot
Mm.
about all the pushing back he did. Even like publicly announcing that he used hydroxychloroquine, I think is what he used, and he publicly announced it, which he knew would not be good for Big Pharma because Big Pharma wants you to believe that the only solution, the only way out of this was their product. So he did a lot of stuff that did push back, and for some reason, I think internally, the alternative media community, because he is not one of us, for lack of a better term, don't want to believe that he did any good or he could be fighting for any of the same causes that we're fighting for.
Yeah, the thing that surprises me the most is that because I really study the history and I read all these, white papers and the blueprints and, when you look at this is a very long range plan. And so what surprises me so much about this space, a lot of people in the alternative media, is that they put so much power on him and yet give him no credit for the things that he has pushed back. Now, I'm not happy about there are a lot of things I'm not happy about, but even with COVID, we know how long that plan was in the works. So to look at the things that he did do to push against it, I'm not happy that he still digs his heels in and brags about warp speed. There's this document from the CIA.gov, and it's called From Mice to Rascals. And they talk about how they recruit assets and agents. And MICE stands for money, ideology, coercion, compliance, and ego. And then they changed it to rascals. And I always blank on the what that acronym stands for, but I think the first, like the R, is reciprocity. Let me see if I can find it. Meister, yeah, it's right here. So reciprocity, and then what are the others? Reciprocity, and then A. I'll find it because I have it right here. Let's see, it's cia.gov. Okay, so mice, yeah, that is the, let me see if I can find what the rascals, okay, reciprocation is the first one. That's R. And then the A is authority. Sorry, A is authority. S is for scarcity. Sorry, I'm trying to read it. So scarcity. And then C is for commitment and consistency. And then oh, wait, where's the L? L is for liking. And then the S is for social proof. So it's kind of similar to the mice. But I think it came out of actually the War Office Selection Boards, which was a Tavistock operation when they ended up working with the British military in World War II as to come up with all these various testing protocols in order to, recruit leaders, military leaders. And then, of course, this got kind of scuttled into the OSS, which became the CIA. And it's really used for recruiting change agents in general. And but when you look at it, I bring this whole thing up just to say that, he's obviously has a bit of an ego. He's obviously enticed by a lot of these things, and he's an easy asset to lure and to control to some extent. And we see that when he digs his heels in, that's my vaccine and it saves so many people. And I wish he didn't do that. I get very frustrated whenever I hear him dig his heels in about Operation Warp Speed, because we know how many lives that has destructed and in some cases, killed and taken. So I'm not in favor of that at all. But I also think you're right to point out that there were things that he did to push back. He absolutely wanted to reopen the country much, much sooner. He did point out, that he himself had used hydroxychloroquine. He even talked about like the UV light. And of course, everybody kept claiming that he was like drinking bleach. I mean, that was the dumbest ever. I mean, like talk about a total propaganda spin. That was really pretty moronic. And the fact that people fell for it, I mean, that was crazy. But yeah, that's the thing that I just can't get past is when you look at these, when you look at the history and the trajectory. I mean, this whole plan with COVID was in the works long before Trump was even thinking about running. I mean, I know there's interviews like he may have considered it in the 80s and whatnot, but I mean, really long before he was ever a contender in the public eye. These plans were in the works. So to think that somehow he was going to be the one to completely squash it, I think what we need are people to be individual agents as disruptors. So if they push back at all, he's not a dictator. He's not supposed to, like, snap his fingers and completely change everything, but he is supposed to push back and, exert the authority that he does have. And I think he's shown that he's done that. And the fact that the most of the globalists are terrified of him. I mean, I've seen the interviews. I really wanted to go, but I wasn't able to. When the UN did their Summit of the Future, there were all these interviews asking about what happens if Trump gets in. This was back in September of 24. And I mean, one after the next, they're just talking about how they're done if he gets in. They're terrified. He's going to be terrible for the world, which means, of course, he's terrible for their power, is really what they're saying. And I think that that's a big indication of something positive. So,
Yeah, I completely agree. But so what are because I don't want people to be screaming at the podcast. Oh, you guys are just talking about the positive things. What are some of the things that maybe you're disappointed in, or things that you think that you're not it don't look as promising?
Oh, a lot of his appointments. We'll start there. I mean, we'll start with education. He was talking about getting rid of the whole Department of Education. Instead, he just filled it with swamp. And he yesterday was talking. He actually tweeted out, "I'm sitting at the state capitol yesterday, trying to fight against this insidious school choice plan." Now, this plan has been in the works, like, I think even further back than the 80s, but we know at least the 80s because Charlotte Iserbyt and John Taylor Gatto were blowing the whistle on it. Charlotte Iserbyt worked in the Department of Education under Reagan and blew the whistle on the BEST project, which was, of course, all this tech ed that we're seeing now. And she was screaming from the rooftops about this school choice agenda. And it was laid out so explicitly that they would market it to the right wing, the Republicans, the people who think they're conservatives. I don't know how you can think this is a conservative agenda or initiative, but it was laid out very clearly that that's what they would do. They would market it with words like choice, that people who like freedom it would appeal to them. But really, it's just a marketing banner because it has nothing to do with choice, because it's government funding. Whatever the government funds, it runs. This is all about creating global citizens. It's literally, of their words, not mine, global citizens, putting every child into a computer. And now that I've gone into some of this research on the biodigital convergence, which is just completely dystopian, and I really didn't want to believe it was real at all because it sounds like crazy conspiracy theory stuff. But the science is there. I'm not saying it's all been implemented. I can't quite verify all of that, but a lot of evidence to indicate it has been, at least, in beta test forms. And it's pretty dystopian. And when you look at that, when they say put every child into a computer, they mean it literally. They're not speaking figuratively. We look at the history of Alice Bailey and her externalization of the hierarchy, her book on education, which was the inspiration for Robert Mueller, who worked for the UN for 40 years, I think it was 38 years, right? The one who coined the term planetics, the planetary rule of the elite, essentially. But he was the Secretary General. He was inspired by Hugh Thant, who was a disciple of Teilhard de Chardin, who coined the term the noosphere. And we're seeing a lot of movement in that direction, which I'm very concerned about as well. But literally, out of Alice Bailey, Robert Mueller created this World Core curriculum, which was what became Common Core, which is what Charlotte Iserbyt calls Communist Core. And that's what school choice agenda is all about: is making every student subject to government schooling, and not just government. It's really going to be public-private partnerships globally. So to see Trump supporting the Tennessee, that's where I am. That's where I was, at the state capitol yesterday, motion towards this voucher scam bill, and which helped it get passed in the Senate Committee on Education yesterday. And then on top of it, to be talking about last night that he's going to make this a national agenda. I warned people that that's where that's going, which is blatantly unconstitutional. There is nothing constitutional about having a federal mandate on school choice. Moreover, just even compulsory education is not even constitutional. So, I mean, that should be eradicated first and foremost. And then, school choice, you already have school choice. Parents have a God-given right to educate their children as they see fit. That means going to public school. That means going to private school. That means homeschooling. Whatever the parent deems is the best for their child, that is their God-given right, and that is their choice. government school choice is not choice. So that was very upsetting to me. Of course, there's this whole Maha platform, which the messaging I love. I mean, I'm all for making America healthy again. I personally have a seed oil allergy. Like, I would love nothing more than not to have to go to every single restaurant and read like a chemist the back of every ingredient because they put World War II artillery grease in our food. Like, this is not edible. It should not be in our food. So, I mean, I really think that shouldn't even be like a political initiative. That should be common sense. And it should be an issue of national security, right? Why are we putting poison in our food? So I love that messaging. Get rid of the glyphosate. Get rid of all these pesticides. In Europe, they allow like 3 endocrine disruptors in their food. In the United States, I think it's 1,800. I mean, it's something insane. I don't know if I have the exact number right, but the last number I heard was 1,800. Whatever it is, it's like 1,000 or 2,000 more than what they're allowed, and that's just, I think it's criminal. It's crazy. So these things I would love to see really be implemented, but then of course they appointed the head lobbyist for seed oil to the Department of Health. So well, that's not super encouraging, and now Maha, RFK and Nicole Shanahan, who I'm concerned about her as well. But they've now said they're against this AI precision medicine, but they've been longtime advocates of it. So I don't know if they've really had a switch, a change of heart, or if this is or if they're just lying their teeth. I don't know. But I will say that obviously Trump supported it. He brought on this whole, championing of this $500 billion Stargate, where we had Larry Ellis, who I don't know why he has any business discussing medicine, the CEO of Oracle, except the fact that, he's 80 years old and he does look great for 80. I'm not sure I want to know how he does that because it looks like it might be more than plastic surgery, but I don't know. But yeah, he's telling us how we're going to have this mRNA technology to predetermine cancer in the blood. But I mean, I've studied AI precision medicine, and AI precision medicine is really about synthetic biology. And this is transhuman. It's really scary stuff. And of course, they're doing it as an arms race. They said it was an arms race with China. They didn't use that terminology, but now we see that's what it is because China just launched their DeepSeek. Although even that is kind of confusing to me because we're always hearing that China lies, right? Haven't you heard this? Like, China lies. And so we can't believe everything they say. But suddenly when they say they've developed this technology in 2 months and that it cost them less than $10 million, then we believe them. Suddenly we're like, oh yeah, totally. They just blew us out of the water. And I don't know, maybe they did. But for all we know, it's part of their like Chinese military project they've been working on for decades. We don't know. And it's just kind of funny to me that suddenly everybody trusts that they're telling the truth on that. But of course, we do see this arms race, and it reminds me of the Cold War. And of course, when we look at the history of the Cold War, we were told that the commies are coming, they're our enemy. And I do think they were the enemy of the American people, but our governments were very clearly colluding behind the scenes. And so I don't know if that's going on now, but I do know the Chatham House before Trump got into office, was doing a lot of symposiums on Cold War 2.0 and Cold War with China, what the difference would be if if Trump got in, if, at the time they were still considering Biden. So, but the fact that the Chatham House was even doing these, conferences on that is quite telling to me. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I could go on. I'm really concerned about this technocracy stuff that Trump is really championing. Of course, he banned CBDCs, which I really am glad to hear. That was great news. But I've been saying for a long time, I think that they were going to present like a dialectical pole where you have the CBDCs, which is the top-down centralization, and then you're going to have the other option, which is going to be what they call decentralized, but is not decentralized. But it's like these network states where they use cryptocurrencies. And I actually think that could be way more problematic and create like a communitarian society. And people don't think about it because it's coming from the private sector, and people are like, oh, do what you want in the private sector. But private sector usually means you're working with public-private partnership that does, work with government policy. And these, even private companies, even if we have network states that use cryptocurrency, you still need a digital ID You still need digital currency to enter. You still could be rejected on, like if you didn't have your ID, if you didn't meet whatever the social credit score of that network state is. There's a lot of problems with that. And then really what I'm seeing they want to do is implement like a tokenized gamified society. And I think that could be a recipe for total dystopian disaster. So
Yeah, the back to the AI, these this just new way, this new technology that they're trying to push onto the public for medicine. It still boggles my mind that we don't get to the root cause of the issue. It's always symptom management. It's like, why do we need all this technology? Why do we need, these new vaccines? Why don't we get to the root cause of the issue? It's like, when I talk to people and they're like, "Oh, the price of healthcare is so expensive, and we should have universal basic or universal healthcare and whatnot," and I'm just like, shouldn't the question be, why do we need so much healthcare? Like, instead of
right,
trying to figure out how we get all these drugs cheaper or all these surgeries cheaper, how about we figure out, like, why do we need so many surgeries and prescription drugs? When we were growing up, and I forget which comedian said it. I wish I could give him credit. But when we were growing up, people used to ask, like, "Hey, are you on any prescription drugs?" You go do a doctor's visit. That was the common question. Today, it's like, which prescription drugs are you on? And
right,
it's just amazing how it's become a way of life. It's become like a multivitamin. It's become like, whatever. And we just accept it, even though we know on the warnings and on the, the pamphlets that come with it, you open it, it has all these side effects. And so some of your other illnesses and issues that you're getting prescription drugs for could be caused by other prescription drugs. And really, like, let's get to the root cause of the issue. And I know I've talked a lot about it on the show recently, but I think it puts things in perspective a little bit on how many chemicals and additives we're consuming on a daily basis. There's a app called Yuka, and I use it, and I don't necessarily agree with its dietary suggestions. Oh, oops, what is it? But it looks like this, and uh,
mm,
it's food and cosmetic scanner. You can just scan any barcode, and then it'll give you a rating, and it'll tell you also the additives that are in it. So, like, in regards to cholesterol, dietary cholesterol, sodium intake, and fat intake, I don't take any of its advice from that, because it still has that very traditional way of looking at food, where, like, oh, you shouldn't eat too much salt, and you shouldn't eat too much fat, and you shouldn't eat too much those the type of things. But in regards to just seeing, hey, what chemicals are in this stuff, it's a great
right,
app, because it'll tell you, like, even certain waters, like bottled waters, that you're like, oh, this is like premium enhanced water. That premium and enhanced water has preservatives in them, and
yeah,
some of them you wouldn't, like Gatorade water, for example. You get Gatorade water, you scan it, and you're like, why is there preservatives in my water? And it's like,
right,
and then it'll tell you, if it's high risk, low risk. It'll tell you what the additive is and what exactly the research is behind it on why it's harmful and whatnot. So I have my kids, like, scan stuff. Well, my son's pretty good. He, like I always say, kids don't do what you say, they do what you do. My son sees the way I eat, and he eats very similar to the way I eat. But my daughter, much like my wife, loves a snack, and so, like, everything, just about everything she eats is like out of a package, or something, and so I'm like, if there's ingredients on it, maybe you shouldn't be eating it. So we'll scan stuff, and I'm like, okay, look at this stuff that you consume on a daily basis. And what people don't realize is that, like, you don't just wake up and are sick. It's like, it's a small progression or digression to,
yep,
so it's like years and years of, like, consuming yeah, maybe in in small sample sizes, like, hey, if I consume this preservative, a little bit once in a while, not going to harm me. But when people are making it a primary thing, where it's in their daily habits of eating these things that are barely food, and you're consuming it, and there's not a whole lot of nutritional value in it, and you're doing it for years and years and years. I was at soccer practice, and one of the kids on the team, his dad was telling me that his son doesn't drink water. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, he only drinks Gatorade. And I'm like, what do you mean he only drinks Gatorade? He's like, yeah, he won't drink anything else. And then a mom that was next to me is like, yeah, when he came over to my house, I had to go get him Gatorade because he wouldn't drink anything in the house, and just because we wanted to give him, want him to be comfortable and drink whatever he likes. And the
Right.
only thing I'm like, what do you brush your teeth with Gatorade? Do you shower with? I'm like, but that's and the parents, it's not their fault. Like they throw in the towel and they're like, okay, this kid's pushing back. If whatever, if it's on the market, if they sell it on grocery stores, if athletes, according to the TV commercials and the games, because they're pouring Gatorade on their coaches or whatnot, if they're consuming this stuff, it can't be that bad, right? It can't be that bad. So my kid can drink it every day. It's like it's a lack of knowledge and a lack of, it's just a little bit of ignorance on the topics. But it's like long term, the amount of sugar and preservatives you're consuming, like, and
Yeah.
who knows how sensitive you are to these things. That's why they don't even do blood. Like, I forget which podcast I was listening to, and they were talking about how insurance companies won't they won't pay for your blood work, and it's like that's absurd when you think about it. Like, there's a lot of things you can just supplement with vitamins. Like maybe I'm vitamin D deficient, maybe I'm this deficient. You can fix a lot of things by doing blood work and kind of figuring out what you're deficient in, and
Yeah.
and instead, it's like, no, just consume all this big food, big pharma propaganda. Take the stuff they tell you to take, and then when you feel like crap, come to the doctor, and they'll write you a prescription. And it's just absurd.
It is absurd. And it's also absurd that, like, even something like Gatorade, when you go to other countries, they don't have all the garbage that we do, even in Gatorade. I'm not saying Gatorade is the best. I mean, it would be great for them to drink water and, even real juice, like things that aren't, synthetic. But when you go to other countries, like, they don't have all these crazy dyes. They like their red comes from beets. They're actually getting nutrients from the color, because it's coming from vegetables. So I think if we just like went back to that, that was one of the things I really did appreciate when Trump was working at McDonald's. Like, I mean, he was totally just trolling, and it was hilarious. He is really funny. I will give him that. But yeah, like he was there, and he was like, "We're gonna bring back tallow to." Fast food fries used to just be real potatoes, not GMO potatoes, real potatoes, and it wasn't even like organic, but because they didn't use all those pesticides, they didn't have to have the official label. So it was real organic non-GMO potatoes, and then it was fried in tallow, and then they put salt on it, and real salt, by the way, not salt that is mixed with all these fillers. When you go to a restaurant, half the time they put like sugar in the water, or like in the salt, they put some preservative in it. They put color to make it white. I mean, it's crazy. Like, why do we care what color the salt is? Like, why do we care? Yeah, it's so all that to say that I mean, even things like Gatorade, I'm not advocating that kids live and subsist on great Gatorade, but in other countries it's not as poisonous as it is here.
Yeah, and Robert Kennedy Jr. and also I forget her real name, but they call her the Food Babe, and I've been following her for a long time. But they talked about this, how like we are poisoning our own people. And
Yep.
you go to Canada, you get the same cereal as you get here. And like you said, maybe it's Lucky Charms and it's not good for you anyways because it's just sugar and whatnot and not really any nutritional value. But the one that's here has all these extra chemicals and all these extra, artificial colors and flavors and textures to make it even more addictive. And the thing about the food companies, what people don't realize is that like they literally do brain scans, some of these companies, and figure out how to tug at your desires, how to tug at, what exact amount of this artificial flavor. So your brain is being tricked. It's literally propaganda for your brain to like
Yep.
convince it that you want more, and you just keep going to it, keep going, and you feel like a crack addict, and it's like it really is. And then when you eat healthy foods, like, so I've been doing the ketovore, I call it ketovore. It's mostly high fat, high protein diet, mostly animal meats and eggs and whatnot. That's like 99% of my diet, and I will, time to time a salad and whatnot, and I use Primal Kitchen stuff because
Mhm.
it's the only dressings and sauces and stuff that's, not bad for you. It doesn't have like seed oil and whatnot, or sugar or whatever. And that's the way I eat. And I've been eating like that forever. And all my joint pain gone. Like in my 20s, I had the worst joint pain ever. Like had to ice my knees after squatting or playing basketball or soccer or whatever. Now, like turning 40 soon, like zero joint pain. Like any joint pains from like just typical joint pain of like playing for a long time and just being sore, right? Or just having a good workout, being a little sore. but that's it. And and all the cancer benefits of it. Glucose is energy source for cancer. You remove
Mhm.
glucose, you can starve cancer. You can even possibly prevent it. I've had Dr. Thomas Seyfried on the show, who wrote the book
Mhm.
Cancer as a Metabolic Disease. And so it's
Mhm.
like so much of our issues are dietary, but
Mhm.
yet we let these food companies put all this extra stuff in our food, and then that same food company will give better, healthier products to other countries while poisoning our own people.
Yep.
It's insane, and it's like the EU. They ban a lot of the stuff that we use here, and here it's like you're innocent until proven guilty. So even with the food companies, throw this thing in the food, and unless somebody can later prove that it's unhealthy, we're just going to assume it's healthy and it's fine. It's crazy.
Or even if we've proven it's not, like glyphosate, I mean, they've proven that in lawsuits that there's a direct link to cancer. So, yeah, I mean, but they continue to put it in.
Who was
So,
the French doctor? Oh my God! Well, the French doctor did a GMO study. Oh, I can't remember who he was. I remember Corbett doing a video on him. Dr. Cirilini, maybe, but
okay.
I believe it was Dr. Cirilini who did a GMO study uh, with mice, found that these mice were getting tumors and whatnot, and it showed a direct correlation with just illnesses and sicknesses and GMO foods and pesticides.
Mhm.
And then it got published, and then eventually the food company got it pulled, and then
Okay.
eventually, like years later, he won in court and showed that they had no right to remove it, and he got reinstated. But by then, everybody already forgot about it, So it's like that's, but like you said, there's all this evidence and it's crazy because it's weird that, and it's funny you said like these fake conservatives, because it does seem like a lot of my views have not changed since the beginning of this podcast. I have been very passionate about like what we eat and plant medicines and all this stuff. And for a long time, like it was a lot of liberal, minded people who were on that
Yeah.
side fighting against the big food companies. And now it's like completely gone in the other direction where it's like all these conservatives, like, family value people who want to live more like our ancestors.
Uh-huh.
And so it's weird how the pendulum has swung, and like it's like I feel like many of us, our views haven't changed, but the people who are, you know, sharing the same opinions have changed.
Yes, I would agree with that. I mean, the crazy anti-vaxxers, those were people on the left. I mean, those were they were called the hippies, and now they've been given the little banner with a little bow, and they've been labeled Republican, conservative, whatever. They're right wing, quote unquote. But yeah, I say this all the time. I feel like there is some, obviously some validity to like the philosophical root of various political ideological the philosophical inheritance of that. But I think today more often than not what we really see is just like it's target audiences for marketing. That's what the labels are. And so people they attach their identity to a certain group. They decide I'm a conservative, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, whatever it is, I'm a libertarian. And so then that gets its own, they think they're part of that group. That's their identity. They wear that banner, and now the powers that be, or the powers that shouldn't be, rather, they know how to market to them, and they do that very, very cleverly. And they use Hegelian dialectical tactics in order to have them fighting against each other so they can achieve their synthesis. And I think that's what we see over and over and over again. So
Yeah, divide and conquer.
yeah.
I'd love to get your opinion on the UAPs. Have you pondered on some of the UFO stuff, the disclosure stuff? For the longest time, UFOs and this type of stuff was never a topic that I really, because there wasn't any substance there. It's like, okay, what are we going to talk about? Like a bunch of people's firsthand experience, and then what? Like, there's not, there wasn't a whole lot of real evidence or anything that you could really use to make a good argument besides just, I guess, putting your faith in somebody's personal story. But
Mhm.
now it seems like with the great documentary by James Fox called The Program, which I highly recommend people checking out, and about the secret government program. I had what's his name, Ralph Blumenthal, who was a part of
Ma-
that. What's that?
Max Blumenthal,
No, no,
or oh
Ralph.
oh
He,
Ralph.
Yeah, there is a Max. Max does great work too.
Yeah, yeah.
But Ralph was the one who did that New York Times story
Okay.
with Leslie Keene, I believe, and a couple other people that really exposed the TikTok
Mm.
videos and all this other stuff, and kind of showed that the government was taking this topic seriously. But obviously, in a world where everything could possibly be a psyop, some people believe that Dr. Greer is, completely just planted, and there's so all these conflicting opinions. What's your thoughts? Have you thought about this?
Well, I haven't followed the specific people you're referencing, but I have thought about this. And I think that what Reagan said, how the greatest, the greatest way to unify the entire world would be the potential of an extraterrestrial threat, right? And that does seem like that's the whole concept behind the like what people think Project Bluebeam is all about. And I do think that that is a card that they want to play. I think there's a lot of things going on with it, though. So I've been studying a lot of the history of theosophy and a lot of these neo-theosophical cults, and they all seem to have some sort of uh, alien type of belief system. So whether it's directly believing in aliens or just interdimensional beings, or this idea of your ascended master speaking to you. Some might argue those are demons, but so they all seem to have that kind of shared belief system, and the Scientology is one of them. And they, of course, it's very prevalent in that uh, worldview or religion, I guess if you call it a religion. And a lot of them have military ties, historically speaking. So I do think that there is a lot of advantage to using the fear of aliens as a way to psyop the people. Now, I mean, as far as whether or not they exist or not, like I have no idea. I think it's we know so little about the universe, and to think that if what we are told about the universe is true, then it's probably not likely that we're the only beings. I know there are a lot of people who question the narratives we're told about the universe, so that's a whole different conversation altogether. But if you do believe the narrative that we're told, it's probably not likely that we're the only. But to believe that there are these sentient beings that have come and communicated with us, the evidence is very sparse. Really a lot of it is all narrative. So, and the narrative serves a great purpose. And I do think that it's a card they use. I don't know that I think they're priming for it. But I don't know that that's like coming. Like a lot of people have speculated that Project Blue Meme is coming really soon. And but I don't know, like War of the Worlds is going to be, reality. But I think it's something that they're prepping, and they're kind of feeling people out, and they're doing a lot of operational preparation of the environment. That's why you hear people like Tucker and a lot of these larger media personalities having these conversations. I think it is to prepare the environment for people to be familiar with this conversation and to start planting the seeds to question it, because I think it's a great tool for psychological manipulation.
Yeah, I definitely am open to that perspective. The thing that makes me think there's something more going on is because when you look at like I love ancient history, and I think there's Tesla and his famous quote: "If you want to understand the universe, you have to understand frequency, energy, and vibration." And when you look at like things like Rupert Sheldrake, who's been on the show years ago, his morphic resonance experiments and theory, and you look at like all these things we don't quite understand, like how do they create the pyramids? This
Hmm.
pottery that was like done with like really hard stone or granite, that were like, how do they manipulate the stone in this manner? I think there's like most modern scientists, like they think they have it all figured out, like, oh, we can explain the majority of the universe. And I think, like most modern scientists, eventually their theories will be wrong or have to be modified as we discover that we don't understand things. And when you look at near death experiences, we did a great podcast on near death experiences with the Union of the Unwanted once, and actually Miriam was actually on that show because she had her own experience. But we end up
Mhm.
getting, and I forget who was our contact, but somebody who's like a famous author on the topic, and we had tons of people on, and everybody was sharing their personal stories, and you're hearing them, and you're hearing their stories, and it's hard to not think like something happened. Like they left to another realm. Something happened. And when you go to like a funeral or a wake, like one thing that was even as a kid that always seemed weird, right? It never freaked me out because I feel like the person's not there anymore. Like I feel like the soul, like we don't know what a soul is, but when you go to a wake, open casket, wake, and you're there and you're looking at that body, you're like, that's not the person's not here. Like the body's here, but like and it feels like it's something more than just a physical thing. Oh, okay, yeah, I get it. It's lifeless, it's not moving, whatever. But we can get caught up in storylines in pro wrestling. So it's like, how does this physical person not give me the feeling of like they're here? Like I sense like they're not here. Like there's a energy that's missing. Um,
Mhm.
so it's like there's things, and I guess my point is like there's all these things that we still can't explain. The placebo effect and manipulation of water. Right? You hear about was it the Asian scientist?
Photo.
Yes.
Yeah. Photo. Yeah.
Yeah. So all these things kind of tell you like, hey, there's consciousness, the dream state, the placebo effect, vibration, energy, frequency. There you would hear stories about these people who would because and it makes kind of perfect sense. Like if you're singing the exact note of so everything has frequency. If I get a glass and
Mhm.
you get the exact frequency of that glass, it shatters, right? Um,
Yep.
Nothing else in the room will shatter, just that glass because you
Right.
get that right frequency. Some people would have used the same theory for cancer and disease. So
Yep.
the cancer cells will have a frequency. If you can find that frequency and hit that frequency, you would kill, the cancer cells and everything else would be fine.
Right.
So like there's all, but that would to accept that would have to completely rearrange the way we look at the world and come to accept the fact that like hey there's something the world isn't just material things and whatnot. So I guess with all that said, and then when you look at like the history of like occultism and these secret societies and Hitler trying to find UFOs and into all these mystics and spiritual things, it almost seems like maybe they also believed that there's more than meets the eye. Like, and maybe some of this wisdom and technology could be suppressed. There's all these people historically that have done like anti-gravity technology, people who have done zero point energy technology, looked into it, and a lot of these people have been suppressed, or they've been murdered, or they've been. And you ever watch the Y Files on YouTube?
No, I haven't.
He's pretty good. AJ's he long ago he was on Rogan's podcast a long time ago. This was way before he even started a YouTube channel, and he was on for another reason. I forget what he was on for. But and then I ran into his podcast, and he does some pretty good work. And he did a I think it was called Forbidden Technology was one episode, and then he did Forbidden Cures, which is another episode. And both of them were all these thinkers and scientists throughout history that kind of did things that would go against modern science and the way we understand the world. So with all that said, when people talk about these UFOs and it's like, okay, well, how would a physical being travel like that? Or how, it's like maybe it's technology we don't quite understand. You look at Graham Hancock and this idea of like looking through history as like this graph, and it's like we assume that this graph is just like, oh, we progress, we progress, we progress, we keep progressing, and we went from like cavemen to like being on the internet, and it was just this constant progression. And he tends to believe that maybe we had these hiccups along the way, right? And then maybe there's some old technology that later civilizations held on to and whatnot. So like my point is like there's all these question marks that make me think that maybe it's more than just like a psyop to control or trick the population into something else.
So I feel like we were discussing two different things, because the aliens, kind of UFO stuff is one thing, and then a lot of this ancient, possibly technology, or even just this idea of there being more than the physical realm, which I don't think too many people dispute. I mean, there are like very hardline materialists, but I think there are a smaller number of people. I think most people acknowledge that there is a soul. That's what makes humans different. And some people believe that every creature has a soul, and that I mean, so I've heard people say even plants have a soul. I don't know that I go that far, but I think that is something most agree on, and it is something that we don't fully understand, but we recognize it as being something that is very special, very valuable. Even you've all know Harari, who keeps talking about how we don't have free will. Thing of consciousness is a thing of a past, but he says we're going to upload that consciousness to the cloud. So clearly it's of value, even though he says it doesn't exist. And I've actually done some study on that. The way they plan to do that is like take a holographic image of our soul. And they're doing studies on that. I don't know how that will actually manifest, but that's the plan. So I think when you talk about those kind of things, there's a lot that's in realms that of course I don't think we fully understand. And I know there's people really trying to understand it. The thing is, when you talk about some of these occultists, these mystics, and people like like Hitler and the Nazis, what we found is a lot of what they're doing. I have a great book. I don't have it with me, but it's the a Cambridge Handbook of Western Esotericism and Mysticism, and it's by Alexander McGee. And he differentiates between mysticism and esotericism. And I would put a lot of those people in the esotericism category. What we found is a lot of the work that they were doing under the guise of these scientific studies of very mystical type experiences was very fraudulent. They didn't really have any, and it was proven to be fraudulent. So they're really doing magic, right? It was it Pike who said that magic is like manipulation of other people's perceptions. And so we see a lot of that repeated throughout history. Does that mean that there are things beyond our comprehension or things that have been suppressed that some people have tapped into? I would argue absolutely. I think that that's probably a given. But I think that those two are separate. I don't know that I would put it all in the same. As far as whether or not any of the UFO stuff could possibly be real, I mean, I don't claim to have that answer. But I will say that I'm pretty sure that a large part of what intelligence is doing is using it for psyop purposes, because anything that is unknown, it creates intrigue, and two, it creates fear. And both of those things are great tools for socially engineering people. So it's a good tool. It's a very useful way to get people to be funneled into whatever narrative or plan that you're trying to foment. So whether or not there's any validity, I think that's a different question. But I think that there's no doubt that they're definitely using it for psyop purposes. And why all it's not just secrecy, it's like this drips of disclosure, right? Like if they really had all those answers, you wouldn't be dripping it. And that's what they do. I think it's to build the mystique, it's to build the intrigue, and to make people feel like when they do get some of the answers that they have the gnosis, they've been initiated. That's kind of what it seems like. So
Yeah, I think the UAPs and that story with the ancient civilizations, I guess I connect them to where I think they cross paths because they both do a similar thing in regards to make you rethink the way you look at the universe. So it's
mm,
one is like you talk about the pyramids. It's like, okay, maybe there is a way of moving things or manipulating things that they understood that we don't understand. And then when you look at like, possibility of life on other planets contacting us or attempting to contact us or whatever,
okay.
it's kind of a similar, you have the same type of response where it's like, okay, maybe the way we understand travel and this type of thing is different. It's funny because right before we went on, we started recording, Rogan just had two people on from that documentary
Oh,
program. And one thing that they were, and I was listening to it a little bit while I was setting up the studio, and they were talking about how they think they use consciousness to operate these things, and that possibly, when they because Rogan, he made a very good point, and it's one that people make quite often. It's like if they're so advanced with technology, how come they're just crashing all over the place? And I'm like, that's a really valid point. And so what these guys said, and they both worked for the military and were part of this like secret program, and they said that they believe that almost like radio waves would get in the way of each other, right? So it's like if I'm, um, on a radio station and it sounds clear and whatever, then all of a sudden, another frequency gets in the way and then it sounds bad, or like antenna on a TV or whatever. That's how they were kind of like trying to describe it. Where like, and they think that maybe the government knows how to disrupt the way they're, I guess, controlling these things. It all sounds absurd, but like I tend to believe that like without a doubt there's something more to the universe than we understand. And when you look at like the potential of anti-gravity and all this stuff, I mean, do you think that like the military, maybe some of this technology could be reverse engineered, or do you think maybe they're just so advanced because as like I'm sure most of our listeners know, like by the time the military lets us know about the technology, they're already way far ahead. Do you think that maybe that's the case, that it's just they're so far ahead that they've tapped into something, or maybe they're suppressing it because they want to control markets, right? There's the story of the Who Killed the Electric Car was a great documentary. Gas Hole Pump, these are all good documentaries that showed how they want to control the petroleum market and milk that cow for as long as they could. And now they're like, okay, now we're moving on to the next money cow, and now we're pushing electric cars onto you. But so what's your thoughts on that?
So I have a lot of thoughts. So I think that the military is always working on, when you talk about that, that's funny that he was saying that he thinks they're using consciousness in order to, because I've been kind of researching a lot of that. And a lot of targeted individuals will tell you that that's already in the works, that that's already happened. Frequency, we know that's not like a secret at all. We know they have optogenetics. They can definitely manipulate things through LED lights, and they can read biometric sensation through using the feedback loops of LEDs. So that's a whole study of like a wireless area networks. And I think good research on that was actually during COVID. They had a Project Salus, where they were doing all of these designated wireless body area networks. So I mean, that stuff we know they can do. We know they can do sound frequency, light frequency, and they can target people to get a response, to manipulate behavior. They can manipulate all sorts of things. They have remote brain kind of interfaces that, are definitely pretty advanced. As far as like how much of what the military is doing that we know that we don't, I think both happen. I think sometimes the technology is way advanced and they don't tell us. They say that it would be too jarring for the masses. They can't be privy to this information. They wouldn't be able to handle it. But I don't think that that's quite true. I mean, in some cases it might be true, and sometimes I think it is that where they are really far ahead. Not that people couldn't handle it. I think it's more to keep things under wrap. But I think sometimes they foreshadow that they're further ahead than they actually are, and this is to kind of steer things towards where they want to go. But they don't actually know how it's going to play out. A lot of times they lay out uh, kind of visions of what they'd like to see, but they're still in the experimental phase of actually being able to make that, execute it. So I think both happen, quite honestly. As far as hidden technology, I mean, I'm sure there's stuff that's hidden. We know with medical stuff, I think that's probably the easiest area where we have some quantifiable evidence, because there are all sorts of things that I mean, Big Pharma is legally not allowed to cure anything. That was actually G. Edward Griffin's like red pill moment. I asked him, I said, so what was the OG red pill guy's red pill moment? And he said it was when his friend asked him to write an article on cancer. And so he started doing some research, and this is when he said, this isn't an article, this is going to be a book. And that's when he wrote A World Without Cancer. And he said that one of the biggest light bulb moments for him was that Big Pharma is not allowed to cure anything. And so we know for sure that there are cures to things. We know of doctors who've been jailed and who've been taken out in some cases, unfortunately, because they were treating people and having positive results. So that's an area, I mean, not quite the same as technology, but I would argue it's a form of technology, and that has definitely been hidden and suppressed. I'm sure there are other technologies that we definitely, don't know. But I also think that I think both happen. I think they also like us to think that things are much more advanced in some cases than they actually are, so they can steer us in a specific direction. So,
Yeah, here's the Y files. This is one that they did, killer patents and secret science, forbidden medical cures. This was a good one, and he documents a bunch of just doctors throughout history that basically were curing people of diseases that we're told can't be cured, or they don't have treatments for, uh, and throughout history, yeah, that's happened. It's amazing how many of these people you look into and you're like, wow, this person, there's a lot of documents and research showing that they were absolutely curing people, and the fact that they're not a household name blows your mind. That they're and so the markets, yeah, I mean, you want to control the markets without a doubt. I mean, I like controlling the markets is scary because we do know about the transhumanism agenda and that direction of that. Do you think that that's basically uncontrollable, unavoidable? Because what always boggles my mind is like everybody's talking about, oh, AI, and this AI is better and that AI is better. And I mean, even on Zoom we have AI companion if we want to have a union of the unwanted with you and I and AI. And to me it's like little by little we're just accepting it and it's becoming normal, and it's becoming it's also the other thing that's really scary is that nobody's doing research anymore. It's like they have become the expert. I recently looked something up on Google, and then I looked it up on Gemini and another AI program, and they all gave me different answers. And I'm just like,
yep.
based on whatever one I use, if I didn't look up the same question on a different platform, whatever one I use, that's going to mold my worldview. That's going to be the right answer to me. And it's like how people are accepting these things as like gospel instead of being like, hey, these things are fed answers and perspectives, and programmers who program these things also have their own worldviews that are going to influence what dictates what they tell you and what they show you, and people aren't considering that.
Yeah, it's very concerning. So when you talk about like technology being suppressed, I think AI is a really good example. I think the AI is actually way more advanced than what is available to the public. I think they drip out a little bit because they want to do exactly what you said. They're getting us used to it. They're conditioning us. This is, now instead of people going to a dictionary, they go to Google. And now instead of doing research, they're going to go to their favorite AI companion. And this becomes a normal kind of daily routine part of life where we don't question it. And then they can start rolling out the more advanced layers of this. And I think that's pretty terrifying. I am very concerned with AI. I'm not somebody who thinks that technology itself is inherently evil, but I do think that they are really trying to create yes, a transhuman world, but they're also trying to create this kind of a collective consciousness. And there are various different, they use different terms, depending on which group you research, they all have their own lingo, but it's kind of all the same concept of this noosphere, and to me, the biggest concern about that is that it eradicates free will. And I think that that's what makes humanity 1.0. And they keep talking about humanity 2.0. And I think that that's, humanity 2.0 is where we are going to see, where we don't have free will. And when you start looking at AI and our collective, I've been diving into something called Game B, and one of their terms that they keep using is collective intelligence. And but it's when you look at a lot of the people who are proponents of this, they're disciples of people like Barbara Marx Hubbard, who also talk. She's behind Heart Math, and she talks about things like global coherence. And, heart math is focused on heart resonance, but now they're talking about heart brain coherence. And this is where, like, I was really hoping the technology wasn't there. It wasn't as evolved as the plans that they're laying out. But what they keep talking about is how, so I did a show on how they say the fourth industrial revolution, right? Which Elon Musk has been instrumental in fomenting every aspect of, with all of his companies, but somehow he's the hero. So there's the fourth industrial revolution, which of course Klaus Schwab wrote his book on, fourth industrial revolution, and the WEF takes credit for coining the term, but a lot of the experts, quote unquote, in this realm claim that we're already in the fifth industrial revolution, and they've laid out Industry 6.0, Industry 7.0 already. So they've already kind of laid out the roadmap for those, the subsequent industrial revolutions. And the terms they keep using are things like agency, human-centered, and it's very deceptive because yes, it's human centered. Where are they getting that information from? Like you said, you go to these various AI. Well, yeah, somebody programs the AI. That's a human. Information is collected from humans who are using it, inputting data into it. So it becomes this like cybernetic feedback loop. But in that regard, yes, it's human centered. It's not sentient operating on its own. And I know some people argue there's already sentient machine. I so far have not seen any evidence that that's true. I don't know if it ever will be true. But what I do know is that machine learning can be quite advanced and it can fool people into thinking it's sentient. The more advanced it is and the better its decision-making capacity becomes. So all of these things get very concerning when you start looking at having just very simply doing what you're saying, where they outsource their own thinking, their own research, their own worldview to a machine learning or a language model program. That's very concerning. I mean, I know just at the most rudimentary level, most people are not capable of remembering a phone number anymore because it gets automatically inputted into their cell phone and they never even see the number, let alone memorize it. But when I was growing up, if I heard a number, I memorized it. And that's not true anymore. So we start to outsource a lot of these very basic skills and our cognitive function declines as a result. So that becomes very concerning. But when you start looking at the layers of that beyond, even those really simple cognitive tasks, and you start looking at how we could be eroding our critical thinking skills and our ability to think for ourselves independently. And we are really kind of creating this collective intelligence, as they call it. That becomes very concerning to me. And what becomes even more concerning to me is when they start talking about how it's going to be using our biofields. It's going to be, working on the, in the quantum realm. And so far, I mean, all of that sounds like it sounds kind of creepy and theoretical, but there is some evidence, there's evidence at least that there has been research done on it. And that's I don't know, that's kind of scary to me.
Yeah, and the fear is that everybody's just like, "Hey, have you used this? It makes life easier." And I always ask the question, like, "But do we need it? Are we creating a weapon that can self-destruct and kill us all? And is it really making our lives any better? Like, do we really like? I don't. If my computer never got any faster, if my car never got any faster, if my phone never ever got any faster or had any extra new upgrades, program upgrades, software upgrades, I'd be completely content. Like, I don't know why there's this need for all these things. It's, and then there, I think eventually this will intertwine with like the universal basic income because now you're going to have tons of computers and AI. I mean, and I'm sure some new jobs will come out of this, but not not for the people who are losing their jobs. And I'm sure it's going to be completely unbalanced with the amount of jobs that you get compared to the amount of jobs that you destroy. And so, and then there's going to be a justification and a need for universal basic income. And and next thing you know, and then they can control your income. Hey, you don't want to get the vaccine? The government requires it. We're cutting off your money. So it is scary.
Or worse than that. So I saw there was an article that Kroger is now doing facial recognition, but it's like social credit on steroids. It's like based on your facial recognition, you may get a different price on a particular item than somebody else. So it's like a targeted price metric based on your facial recognition, which I mean, that's just like, yeah, when I was saying they're trying to tokenize the economy, that's what they're looking at. And it's crazy to think that they talk about like how you can have fractal ownerships of assets. So I don't know. I mean, it's not, we'd like to think that, families are always just warm and loving and always want the best for each other. But the reality is, there's a reason why estate lawyers exist, because it usually does not go quite that well. And this is family who have shared assets, and they can't seem to figure it out and get along and make it work. But now we're going to have these communities in a network state, in a communitarian society, where you own a shared piece of some land or art, and you own fractal portions of it, and then somehow we're gonna have to have a UBI because people don't have any income. And really, I think that they're even before income is no longer viable. I think they're going to try and move us into a UBI sooner than that. And then you're going to be on a tokenized system where the AI World Society calls it a social value reward system, which I know sounds really nice because it's a sound meritocratic, but they claim it's not like China's social credit system. But the only difference is that, China's social credit system is a very top down kind of a, surveillance social credit system. This is still going to be very much surveillance, only you're going to be kind of, you're more, it's more of an opt-in. You're going to be choosing to earn various points, but based on what? Right? Like, well, what is the reward system based on? It's based on a system that they've deemed of what is valuable and what is not, what you should be rewarded for and what you shouldn't. And it's probably going to be, this kind of a consumeristic, like, people getting tokens to watch various ads and be part of focus groups type thing. Or it'll be part of like power grids where they've literally talked about 6G as using human energy to harness power, to power the 6G. The University of Amherst, Massachusetts, laid out all of their research on this, and the AI World Society talks about how they would use that for the Internet of Nanobio things. I know, sounds like crazy sci-fi dystopian stuff, but I mean, this is what they've shown research, and this is what they're laying out the blueprint for. So maybe you'll get more tokens if you create more ATP to go into this system. I don't know, because they're now talking about using mitochondria because that's where the ATP is housed. But yeah,
That's wild. Bit,
yeah,
Bitcoin, because that's the thing. It always makes me think about Bitcoin. In a way, it's like you had all these people that were excited about, like, hey, we get to, um, disconnect from all these systems and governments and kind of, do transactions peer to peer, basically, and we can bypass all these fees and government agencies and banks and whatnot. But there's always the concern about was it a way of kind of conditioning us to just accept digital currency? What's your thoughts on that?
I think so. I've been saying that kind of from the beginning. It hasn't been very popular opinion, but I do kind of think so. I know people argue that it is not a fiat currency because it is finite, and so therefore there is intrinsic value from the mathematical structure. And while that may be true, that can be changed. It can also be regulated out. So they could condition you to be, to jump into the Bitcoin community, Bitcoin usage, and to be a proponent of it. And then they could decide, well, okay, now Bitcoins can't be used, but you can use these others. And what really I see, and the other thing is blockchain, yes, it's harder to hack into, but it is not completely secure. I know people have really argued with me on that there's been lots of evidence where it's been hacked into. Yes, it's difficult. It's very difficult. That does not mean that it is completely secure. I think that's less of a concern, to be really honest, though. I don't think they're going to go out of their way to try and, although wasn't there that case of like a couple who stole $1 million or something? Yeah, Bitcoin. So, I mean, there you have it. It can be done. But my bigger concern really is that, so you have these CBDCs, which people are really becoming very aware of. I think there's going to be way too much pushback. Trump has already done his executive order banning them. Great. But I wasn't that concerned because there was so much publicity around them that really, unless you're like one of these, globalists and like a UN champion who really wants everything to be completely centralized, very few people, at least in this country, are supportive of a central bank digital currency. There's a lot of pushback already. So now they're going to say, okay, we've got this other option over here, this shiny object, and they're going to create the dialectical pole, but it's where they keep talking about DeFi. They say it's decentralized, but there's nothing decentralized about it. It's like an oxymoronic term to say that you're going to have they call it apps too, decentralized apps, but everything's interoperable. Like you can use it for everything. You can share all your information and interact with this community, and this community can interact with that community, and we're going to use blockchain, but then we're going to put hollow chains on top of that. And you're telling me this is so private and like it's agent centric, and the other buzzword they use is peer to peer, right? It's all peer to peer. But if you have all this interoperability, it can't really be that decentralized. And it's not really that decentralized because the concept is a network state. And so I don't know if you're familiar with the network state, but this is Vishal Srinivasan. He was the CTO of Coinbase. He wrote this book called The Network State. And he has a whole chapter in it. Peter Thiel is very supportive of the network state, but there's a chapter on seasteading, which was Peter Thiel's venture before network state. I think he put $1.7 million into it, which, not a tremendous amount of money for him, but, for most people, it's a considerable amount, and it didn't really take off. So he's now kind of championing this concept of a network state. And it's this idea, very simply put, just that there would be a dissolution of geographical nation states in favor of these ideological cloud networks. So, you might have, I always use the example of dietary communities because they're so contentious. Everybody thinks their way is the best way. So you'll have like the carnivore network state, and you'll have the vegan network state. And, maybe if you're in the vegan network state and they spy on you and realize that you've had a piece of steak, you might get kicked out. And that sounds like fun and games when you get kicked out of a clique, but what happens when you're kicked out of a community that you have a special digital currency, you have a whole digital ID that's attached to everything in your life in that network state, when you own shared assets in that network state, and suddenly you don't have access to your entire metaverse, which has replaced most of your physical realm, that could be a big problem. So, and people think that, if something is a quote unquote decentralized, which really isn't decentralized, but it means that there's these various sections. It's communitarianism, essentially, digital communitarianism. They think that you have so much more freedom, but no, now you're just subject to a particular community as opposed to, it's like local communism versus like having a worldwide government. But either way, I mean, anybody who's had a difficult HOA knows you're not all that free when you, or you've lived in a condo. I mean, it's all kind of the same idea, right? When you live in a condo, you don't really own your apartment. You pay in, you own a share. It's like owning shares on the stock market. You own a share, and that's your little space that you live in, but you don't have purview over like things you want to build in it, changes you want to make, even sometimes your like lifestyle. Like some condos, if you make noise after 10 o'clock, you can get kicked out and not get compensated for it. So I'm just giving you a very micro scale of what it could be living in some of these communitarian projects. So
It is funny because when I talk to people, they say they own a condo and they talk about it like it's their house. And I'm just like the whole theory just always seemed weird to me because I'm like, you kind of own it, but you really don't have any say or control, and you have limited, power in regards to changes and whatnot. So it's like, like you said, I think that example of calling it like a share on the stock market is a perfect way of putting it. And I think that same type of trickery of using the right words and to convince people that, hey, you own something and yet you don't really have full control over it will probably be used in many other things. So without
not be happy.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, without a doubt. And that's the thing, like even with, I had Alex Trainer on um not too long ago, and I remember talking to him, and we've talked in the past about this, about like, in theory, the universal basic income idea sounds great, right? I mean, this
Sure.
idea of like, hey, you know what? Like, why do people have to work their whole lives, for this pension plan and to retire and they invest all their, the best years of their lives into some, soulless job where the corporation doesn't really care about them anyways and whatnot. Like, if we have all this technology and computers and whatnot, why couldn't we work a little less and still and still live pretty good lives? But the truth is, once you give government that control, that's the problem, right? It's just like you can't trust them with that type of power and control over the human society, because there's corruption and there's it's going to be used for all the wrong things eventually, so that again, like most things in theory it might sound great, but once you put it into practice, the flaws in the issues get exposed. But Courtney, thank you so much for taking time to chat. I'll definitely have to have you on in the near future again. I feel like that we barely scratched the surface on a lot of these topics. Let people know where they can keep up with your work. I know you're still active on Rumble, putting out episodes. I think you put one out today, and I know you're on X, and you have always have a bunch of things going on. So let people know where's the best place to keep up with all your latest and greatest work and episodes, and anything else you might want to share.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This was so fun. I always love chatting with you. So people can find me at CourtenayTurner.com. I spell my name like Courtenay. So it's CourtenayTurner.com. And yes, I'm on all those platforms, pretty much everywhere podcasts are, although I have very few episodes on YouTube because I'm working on my fifth channel and I'm hoping to keep it for a little while. So I don't post there quite as frequently. But I did start a Substack about 5 months ago. And as you said, yes, a universal basic income would be wonderful because then I would not have to worry about these pesky little things like paying bills. But unfortunately, I do. And that's the price I pay for freedom is to have some autonomy. But I am trying to figure out how I can keep going. So I would love if people would do a paid subscription to my Substack. I am going to be start doing more premium content. We're going to be putting all of my all of my podcasts go out to Substack first. So you do get early access right now. We're going to be making those ad free. So I know people have said that the ads are not their favorite. So we're just trying to figure out how to please everyone and still keep going. And I am going to be working on some more articles and I have a concept for a book. So hopefully I'll find some time between all of that. And I am going to be launching a product within the next few weeks where we're just working on the website, working out some kinks and doing a little bit of beta testing. So we will be launching that soon. So that will be exciting. Yeah.
Awesome. And people go listen to the last Union of the Unwanted, because she actually announces what the product is, and maybe even a possible partnership with somebody who was also on the show. So
Yeah.
so definitely check that out. And yeah, and keep me updated on that, because I'll make sure to put the links in the show description, or when you're ready to launch, have you come on, we can talk about it and all
I'd
that.
love
And yes,
it.
people hate ads, but like they don't support free work because it's free. So a lot of people don't want to invest in the podcast that they know they're going to get for free anyways. So that's why a lot of you're starting to hear more and more commercials. That's why Rumble has commercials. That's why YouTube has commercials, and people buy into that because it's really one of the few ways you can monetize.
Yeah, and I mean, as you know, it takes a lot of time, and people think you hop on, but even when I'm a guest, I do a lot of research beforehand, and I do a lot of solo shows too. They're kind of lecture style, and I do pretty extensive research. Most of my shows are, anywhere from 1.5 to 3. I've done 4.5 hour shows, but yeah, even my solo work sometimes, like most of the live streams have been 2.5 hours. So it's a lot of material that takes time to put together. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how many busy people have 90 minutes to sit down for a conversation, and then never mind the time of emailing, booking guests, like you said,
So
research and editing, uploading,
yes.
thumbnails, descriptions, like all this stuff requires time. And it's like, if it's like I always tell people, I'm like, if a show is your go-to show. Like everybody has like a handful of go-to shows that they listen to on a regular basis. Like I get it, you can't support all the shows you listen to, but like support some of your go-to shows. Like Corbett, Highwire. Like I supported both their work, still do for many years because those were like some of the shows I was listening to all the time on a regular basis. And like I got to support their work. I'm like, I'm consuming their work. Why wouldn't I? And it doesn't have to be a lot. Like,
Right.
I always tell people, I'm like, no donation is too little. Like, no podcaster, YouTuber, or whatever content creator is going to be like, oh, what a cheap ass. He's only contributing $1 a month. It's like, if of a small percentage of people who watch and listen contribute only $1 a month, like we wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd all be doing pretty well. But the truth is like a very, very, very small percentage of people ever contribute anything. And
Yeah.
so it does get to the point where it's like, hey, nobody wants ads, but if that way, we can get a little bit of money. If I still lived in my mom's house and I didn't have any bills whatsoever, I wouldn't even be thinking about monetizing anything. I'd be like, who cares? But as you get older, you have to get to a point where like, okay, if I can make this work a little bit more worthwhile in regards to monetizing. And I think for the most part, people in our community, it's not like they're selling their soul to big pharma. They're not trying to sell you statins. They're just
Right.
so
It's
it,
just trying to provide information. Yeah. So,
exactly. So
although that was a good thing. If Trump does ban pharmaceutical advertisement,
that'd be
that would be,
that's a
yes, we support that.
it is crazy the amount of things he's just done and proposed in the last like week or so. It's nuts. Like it a little piece of me is like worried that like are we gonna see a JFK moment? Like, JFK, you had the Bay of Pigs, you had his opinions on the Federal Reserve, he butt heads with Alan Dulles. Like there's all these things that like a lot of people believe and contributed to his assassination. I'm just like, is he pissing off too many people all at once? It's like
Well, and my other concern with that is that I think JD Vance is like their prime puppet. I mean, he's a Peter Thiel protege. He's a neo-integralist. He's got a lot of things working, with the deep state advocates. So I think they would love nothing more than to get their puppet installed. So I am concerned about that. But I think Trump is pretty aware, and he's tightened up his security. I think that's why he's doing a lot of things out of Mar-a-Lago instead of at the White House. I don't think it's like a convenience or like a quirky thing. I think it's a security thing, but I
I
could be wrong.
yeah, no, I think you're right. And I'd be even nervous with like food that you're ordering. I mean, he's eating
I think
McDonald's.
that's why he eats McDonald's. That I not that McDonald's is good for you, but I think that's why it's because it's a controlled environment like that. There's so many of them that the chance of them being able to target to poison him is less likely.
He's
Yeah,
like,
he's actually talked about it. I think. Yeah.
that's funny. It's like at least I know who's poisoning me. It's just McDonald's.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Courtney. Hey, we'll keep in touch. I'll keep you in the loop for future Union of the Unwanteds, and I'll send you the links to this show once it's up and live, and we'll have to do this again soon.
Awesome. Would love it. And you'll have to come back on mine.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. Yeah. Take care, Courtney.
all right. Bye.